I'm so glad you did that because I have been against this super prompt idea.
So that's not how large language models work.
I always say start where you're weakest.
You can't argue with math, you can't argue with science. That's just how large language models work.
Hey, it's Ronsley. Welcome, you AI geek, to Amplify AI. Consider this podcast your digital compass for you, the business leader wanting to use artificial intelligence ethically and in alignment with your brand's identity to achieve your business goals. Leading and running a business in the world of AI is like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. But this podcast and I are here to make that easy. Every episode is a masterclass in unlocking techniques for using AI as a business leader, founder, owner. Thanks for being here. Let's learn.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Episode number 80 of Amplify AI. My name is Ronsley, and I have another two-parter for you. This first part is all about going beyond the super prompt and why a super prompt is a very bad idea. We're talking about crafting conversations with AI featuring Jordan Wilson. If you don't know who he is, he's got a really amazing daily podcast called Everyday AI, and you can find it on all your favorite podcast platforms, but definitely on LinkedIn as he goes live on LinkedIn. We talk about the diverse backgrounds that leads to innovative AI applications. We talk about generative AI's impact on professional writing and why you should not just output everything that you see or create on generative AI. We talk about the art of prompting artificial intelligence and the ethics and why ethics should be at the forefront of AI adoption. This is a very practical episode with Jordan Wilson, and this is part one of the two-part episode. So come, let's learn.
So let's talk about Everyday AI. You took 15 years off. You started it again in 2023 when the world changed with artificial intelligence. What was your background getting into it? And why, after knowing how hard it is, why did you decide to do a daily show again?
I started out as a journalist, did that for about 7 years full time, multimedia, photo, video, audio, all that good stuff. Then I spent about 9 years at a nonprofit, but we just became an activation and creative agency for Nike and Jordan brands. That's all I was doing. And then for the last 5 years, I've had my own business, right? So I've had a digital strategy company for the last 5 years. And, going back, like, I literally, in my business plan, before I started my digital strategy company called Accelerant Agency, I literally wrote in my business plan that, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but the value of marketing and advertising is going to change with technology. So in my business plan, I said, I'm going to do this for 3 to 5 years. I'm going to save up money from my agency, and I'm going to invest in whatever this next big wave is. I had no clue what it was, but it became pretty clear to me once our team started using the GPT technology, which predated ChatGPT by about 2 years. Once we started using that, I'm like, okay, this generative AI thing that I can't find anything on the internet about, this is what that next kind of iteration or the next pivot of my life is going to be.
Like a long time ago, it seemed like, what did you see that made you decide to kind of go, okay, this is going to be the next big thing? I mean, for me, I'm a computer scientist. Like, I always knew that the technology, we got faster computers and we got faster chips and we got cheaper storage and faster networks, we'd definitely get to this point. So it was only a matter of time. We did get here quicker than anyone expected. But what did you see? You kind of went, all right, now this is going to be the next chapter of my life.
I'll say this. I've always been a geek. I've always been a technologist, I guess. Even in high school, I became a Microsoft certified professional. So I've always been into and followed technology very closely. So once it got to the point where we started, using the GPT technology in earlier programs like Copy AI and Jarvis, I think were, two of the bigger programs that we used at the time. And I've been getting paid to write for 20 years. And as soon as the technology and how I learned to use it, as soon as I'm like, oh, this is a better writer than me, and I've won national writing awards, and this is something that I think is going to change the way we work. Luckily, generative AI has exploded since then, and it's much more now than simple text to text AI, I think that was kind of the early sign for me when I said, okay, I'm a professional writer. I said, this is going to change the way that the world works.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I loved at this point talking about this because normally when someone says, Ronsley, I want to use AI, I want to adopt AI in my business, where should I start? And I always say, start where you're weakest, because it's like that's the space that you don't have time to judge. You just get it on with it. You're better off doing something than not doing anything. If you know, for example, as a business, sales are low, or engagement is low, or whatever your content or whatever you're creating, right, is just one of your weaker things. But in your case, you're going, well, I was a really good writer and I found a way to make sure that I got it to write better than me. What did you do and how did you think about the whole writing process that allowed you to make this thing, like it literally, I feel like it's augmenting your intelligence, right, in a lot of ways. How did you structure that? How did you start thinking about it? And what did you do to get it to write better than you?
Practice. I'm a very kind of tear it apart type of person, at least when it comes to technology, right? Like I like to break things. I taught myself like basic web design. I tried to take a class in college, but I'm like, this isn't working for me. So the way I learn a lot of things and the way that I like to try to get better at them is I like to break things first, right? Like I like to push it to its limits, see what it can do, see what it can't do, try to hack it, just like fun stuff like that. And it's through those experiences where you're trying to break things that you actually see both what you and whatever technology or whatever platform that you're working with are capable of, right? Because I could have gone a very traditional route and boring and, followed a bunch of tutorials first. I always get to the tutorials later, but, it makes much more sense when you've already gone through it yourself. That's just how I've always learned is I go in, get my hands dirty, see what I can break, and then I learn to see why did I break it? How can I do it better next time?
So you broke a bunch of stuff. You must have some rules when it comes to prompting, because you teach a lot of us how to prompt better in prompt engineering. What are some of the basic rules that we need to follow?
Good question. This is going to sound weird. Don't use prompts. So, yeah, if anyone listening is probably going to be like, oh, this guy has no clue what he's talking about. So that's not how large language models work. If you want to get super technical, we could talk about like MMLU benchmarks and, 0 shot versus 1 shot versus 3 shot versus 32 shot chain of thought prompting, right? Like your highest scores. So essentially like an MMLU benchmark is a benchmark that, anyone in the machine learning AI, large language model space, that's just kind of like a benchmark that says this is, the closest thing to human reasoning, right? And all the models, they get like thrown into this benchmark. You get scores, you can compare, right? Every single model, every single benchmark, it always does better with more shots or more examples, right? And that's the same thing. And I like when it comes to prompting, which I still don't understand why people are just trying to, find a 500-page prompt and put it in there, and then they spend an hour trying to make it usable. No, you speak to it like both a child and Einstein, right? Like that's what I tell people. Like when you start a new chat, if you're using like Chat GPT as an example, and you click that new chat button, that new chat knows both nothing and it knows both everything. The output is determined by how patient you are in teaching it exactly what you want and not prompting right away. People like they go in and they just want an output now. It's not what a large language model is, right? Like if you're working with a small language model, a small model, yeah, like if it's fine-tuned for a certain type of creative writing, you can do that. Working with a large language model and you start a new chat, like you have to be patient. You have to almost make it a smaller model, or you have to kind of train it or teach it to know exactly what you want it to. And it takes a lot of patience and back and forth. And getting back, I promise I'm going to finish the story here, right? That's the concept of higher prompts, right? Like a 32 shot chain of thought prompt always outperforms a 5 shot. So it's the same thing. The more back and forth, the more examples, the more conversational you're prompting, the better the output every dang time. I will take someone who has a conversation with a large language model for an output versus the quote unquote smartest person who creates these 500-page prompts, because the output You can't argue with math. You can't argue with science. That's just how large language models work.
I'm so glad I asked you the question. I was going to ask you about your podcast, but I decided that I'd talk about this AI bit just before I went into how you recorded the podcast. And I'm so glad you did that, because I have been against this super prompt idea from the very beginning, and people selling these super prompts and kind of having really bullshit arguments of why it's a good idea, when you're right, the math and the science just tell you exactly. I mean, we know it's built on our neurology and on our psychology, and we know that the old traditional waterfall method of doing software agile is the better way to develop, and that requires frequent updates, which means your requirements are constantly updating when you're building, and you're building while you're updating. We know all these things, right? But when it comes to these kind of, we want the 6-minute abs or the super prompt.
Can I tell you a secret? It's not my secret. It's everyone else's secret, right? Like I talk with people in the AI space a lot, both executives at large companies building the technology. And I talk to other people, similar like myself, who are, creating content, or they have AI newsletters, et cetera. I was talking with someone that I respect a lot. I'm not going to name their name. I hold those things in confidence. And this person said to me, they're like, hey, Jordan, I know prompts don't work, but I'm going to start sharing them on social media because I know that's what people want. I know it doesn't work, but it's going to help me build a following or build an audience. So I will say even 2/3 or 3/4 of the people out there either sharing these prompts or selling these prompts, they know they don't work, right? Some people don't know. Like some are just like kids and they're trying to become influencers, and they're all in their engagement pods, and they're all like, oh, this changed my life. There's like that group that just doesn't know anything, and they're 19-year-old NFT influencers turned crypto influencers turned chat GPT experts. And then there's those that actually know and say, hey, I know this doesn't work, but I'm going to tell my audience that you need this because it's going to help me build an audience.
It's fascinating because right now I'm finishing my second book. It's called Amplify AI, and it's a ethical way to achieve your business goals in alignment with your brand identity. So ethics is chapter 2. And it's fascinating that we've come across this super power almost in artificial intelligence.
Hey, AI Geek. Thanks for listening. Your job doesn't stop here. I want you to lend your voice to the conversation. So you can join those conversations, discussions, new trainings, new recordings, and the rest of the AI Geeks by going to aigeeks.co. Also, share this podcast with a friend, another potential AI geek. Until then, much love.